So please welcome first Jerolyn Murray.
Good morning. I think Michelle knew that I'm a music junkie, and having those awesome performers come before me would settle a lot of the nerves that I'm feeling right now. But I'm really glad to be here today with you all to share my story and how I'm working every day to transform rural communities from what we know as the corridor of shame to becoming the corridor of innovation. I grew up in a very small town in South Carolina, so small that we only had one traffic light. One. And I think we got that traffic light when I was about 12 years old. And it was an exciting time for us because all we had were stop signs and dirt roads and more dirt roads and more dirt roads. We had one high school. If you can imagine, in a town like this, everyone knew everyone that knew someone else who knew everyone. Another time that brought a lot of notoriety just to the residents of that small community was when we were asked to have the town be used for the Forrest Gump movie. I don't know if many of you remember this scene from Forrest Gump, but it was shot in my hometown, and a few of my classmates were used as extras in this movie. So we thought we were on the map. So I went to school there, and I was the typical student in that area who got good grades, who worked hard. And with my mom being a single parent, raising both me and my two sisters, education was never a conversation about if. It was always an expectation. And so as a young child, I remember not having a lot of Barbie dolls, not because I didn't want them, but because my mom thought it was very important to put things like speak and spell, if those of you who can remember the speak and spell. So I had toys that continued to feed my mind, and that showed up when I graduated from high school at the age of 16 years old. After leaving my hometown, I went away to school, and when I got there, I was so amazed at how much diversity there was at Georgia Southern University. It was then that I realized that I grew up in a town where we were underserved. But because that was all I knew, I did not recognize that there was so much more that I could attain. When you change your environment, you can change your life. And a lot of times people think about changing their environment as changing physically where they're located. But sometimes the environment can be right around you, and that change can occur with a simple change in the way you see things, a simple change in the way you respond to things that have always been the norm. And it takes a lot of courage, it takes a lot of boldness to do that. So it was not only diversity in my peers who were at Georgia Southern University, there was diversity in the instructors, there was diversity in the way things were done. Most of all, there was diversity in the way opportunities were presented. In my small hometown, where teachers had been the same for many years, we automatically knew, moving from the middle school to the high school, what pockets of kids would be participating in different activities. There was never a question, there was never pushback, we just accepted it for what it was. During my time studying business at Georgia Southern, because I did not traditionally pursue education as a career, I knew then that everything I was being exposed to at GSU, something inside me rose up and indicated that I would eventually need to take some of this that I was getting and take it back home. Of course, you have those voices that say, you have this degree now, why don't you just go and do something in the corporate sector, make a lot of money, send money back home. And I did that for about 5 years as a trainer. But life happens. And after having my son, I found myself back home because I did not want to raise him in a place where there was not a lot of support and that he would have a different experience than I did, because I did value where I came from. Well, I thought that was the reason I was going back home. But when I got offered a job at the middle school where I attended, I knew that that small passion I felt at GSU was being reignited. I had to go back home to help make a change. When I walked through the doors of that same middle school where my mom graduated from, it was her high school, and it was the same building, the same hallways, even some of the same teachers. My heart broke, because in a world where change was happening so rapidly, here we were in small rural South Carolina with credit for a part of Forrest Gump, still doing things the same way and expecting a different result. If anybody knows, that's the definition of insanity. So going there and teaching business and teaching career development to middle schoolers, yes, it's still the same. I knew a lot of the kids' parents because they either went to school with me or went to school with my siblings. And so connections were easy. But the way that I wanted my students to take the information and use it was foreign to them. They had never seen it before. And so when you don't know the truth of a thing, or when change is presented in such a way that it makes you uncomfortable, naturally we resist. But because I'd been exposed to so much diversity and so many opportunities, the resistance that would make the normal person regress and go back to doing what was accepted, I didn't take that. I couldn't take that, because I knew that there was so much available that otherwise these children would not be able to see and to do. So after spending about 5 years in my hometown, making an impact, and hearing some of the naysayers among my colleagues then, who ironically were also my former teachers, why do you have to do things this way? I realized that there was always this unspoken group of haves and have-nots. And so I found myself moving to Walterboro, which is about 30 minutes from my hometown. Slightly different because they had a Walmart, and we did not. But still very much the same. And it was then and only then that I discovered the corridor of shame. The corridor of shame refers to this strip of rural communities that runs along the interstate I-95, which stretches from Florida all the way to the upper parts of the country. And in these areas, it was considered by society to be shameful areas. These are areas where the stigma that nothing good comes from these areas was very, very heavy. We were underserved, underperforming. We were assumed to be undereducated, and thereby, the state did not see us as the haves. Buildings were old. Families and communities were still doing things the old way. And so this change that I began in my hometown, I continued to do that work in Colleton County. And thankfully, there was a fearless leader in Colleton County who was also a graduate of my high school who felt the exact same way. And so I found myself in Cougar New Tech Entrepreneurial Academy, where we practice deeper learning through project-based learning using the New Tech model. And this was exactly what I'd been trying to do without even knowing that this was what I was doing. I understood, being a former employee of the corporate sector, that employees did not really care only about how much knowledge a person possesses, but they want someone who's holistically an asset to their company. Being in this corridor of shame, you would think that industry would be beating down the doors to come to our area because it is easily accessible. If anyone in this room has never been on I-95, raise your hand. Take a trip to Florida. If you can get there without going to I-95, let me know. Industry should have been coming to this area. They did not. And I raised a lot of questions about why that was so. The reasons were we were not producing the type of workers that would sustain the success of the corporations. My kids every week, why can't we have Chick-fil-A? Why can we not have Starbucks? Those multi-million-dollar companies want employees that continue the legacy and the quality that is associated with their brands. And so in this, and in the Entrepreneurial Academy, we did not just focus on making sure that our students memorized the content for a unit test and then crammed for 2 weeks before a standardized test. We taught the whole student. We built relationships with them. We established a culture that was conducive to the type of growth mindset that we knew we could produce in our kids. Activities like Trust Day and hands-on labs where they were solving a real-world problem. Bringing in community partners to talk about things that they were trying to solve in their businesses locally. Our kids did that. It was during my first year at Colleton that I met a group of students who were in the Entrepreneurial Academy. I did not teach them at the moment, but among this group were lots of kids that reminded me of myself. So there's another match to that flame that was ignited inside of me. I saw the same things in them that I saw in myself. Having the drive to do better, but being afraid about the comments that would come from their peers who had accepted the norm. So dumbing themselves down just to fit in. Doing just enough to get by. Not going after things because that's not what the community says should happen. You have to understand that this was an environment where mediocrity was acceptable. And failure, unfortunately, sometimes was an option. Well, among this group, they understood that I brought something real. They saw that I looked like them, and if I didn't look like them, I looked like somebody they knew. Because remember, everybody knew everybody. And I feel like that's very important. So the things that I did in my classroom were to bring those relevant pieces in. If I wanted, and at the time I was teaching with science, if I wanted them to learn about periodic table, traditionally, they study the table, they'd memorize it, they remember the colors of the rows and columns so that they could reproduce that information on the test. Get an A, you're lucky to get a B. But our kids have cell phones in their hands now. And they use apps every single day. So why couldn't I teach them how to create an app? Why couldn't I challenge them to create an app for someone learning about the periodic table for the first time? And that's what we did. And those kids were so proud of the work that they did that they were hungry for more. we no longer had to worry about discipline issues or attendance issues because the work was so meaningful, the work sparked so much curiosity that they wanted to be there. Those who could not be there would Skype in, they would get on Google Hangouts and try to reach us, what's happening today, what's happening? That is what I felt when I was at Georgia Southern. And to see that in my students let me know that it's happening. Another project that we did that really drove it home was in our digital media marketing class, a new business was coming to the community. CrossFit is a national brand, and they have local gyms. And this gentleman was moving to the area and was looking for someone initially to build a website. Sure, my kids can do that with their eyes closed. So this class particularly was a group of 8 young girls, all in their junior year, and they took on the task. I told them what the business owner asked for, and I let them go. Had I done that at home, had I done that 5 years prior, everybody would have freaked out. You mean you didn't give them a workshop? You did not give them a lecture? You didn't do guided practice? You didn't do independent practice? I let my kids discover. And in that, what started out as a simple web design project became a small consulting firm for this business. They met with the business owner as professionals because they understood that they were professionals only because that's the way I treated them. Kids will respond to the way you treat them. If you set the bar low, and I know I'm preaching to the choir, they will only reach as high as you set the bar. Among this group, we're all a part of the first class at Cougar New Tech, where we graduated 100% of students in that program. Knowing that this was happening, giving all the pushback we received from the community, because again, this wasn't the norm, this was seemingly impossible with what we had, we didn't pull the cream of the crop. We did not pull students only who were identified as gifted and talented. So that passion that began in me back in 2002 when I graduated from Georgia Southern continued to be refueled and reignited. Because in here I saw a young man who came and was identified by prior teachers as someone who would make it past 10th grade, he would drop out. And here he is, graduated with a high school diploma and is now at a 4-year university pursuing a degree. I work to see the day when a troubled kid like this one from a single parent household who battled with coming to school or going to work to help put food on the table graduated and is now doing great things in a career that he prepared for through a technical career center partnered with Cougar New Tech. I worked for the day when this young lady who became a teenage mother thought about quitting because she didn't understand how she could be a mom and a student, graduated, and now is doing something so that she can provide for not only herself but also her son without relying on the system. I live to see the day when students like Tevej Rhodes go off to a D1 school. Not only go off to a D1 school, but is classified as a junior because she pursued college courses while still in high school. And although she's first year, she's there with so much knowledge and such a wealth of skills that she is steps ahead of what the corridor of shame said that she should be. So I work every day to make sure that this transformation happens. And now when people ride up and down Interstate 95, they will no longer look and say, nothing good comes from the corridor of shame. But they will beat down the doors and ask, where is there open land that we can build? Because this corridor of innovation is where we need to be. And so I'd like to introduce you to Tevej Rhodes.
Hello, good morning. And just a side note, I was the student asking why we couldn't have a Chick-fil-A. I was tired of McDonald's. So I actually grew up in Walterboro. That's where I was raised. We did have more than one traffic light. But still, everyone knew everyone, and if you didn't know everyone, you knew someone who knew them. And in this town, I was portrayed as a half. My father was the chief of police. My uncle owned a dentistry. My grandfather was on the board of directors at our local coastal company. So to the outside, I was a half. But they didn't quite understand what my household was like. I was actually raised in a single-parent household, where my mom often worked many jobs, often taking on multiple jobs. There was even an extensive period where she was unemployed. I remember one night when I was in elementary school, I woke up and I found my mom crying on the phone. Through her mumbles, I could make out that she was unsure how she was going to pay tomorrow's light bill. And this was new to me, because I knew my mom was a hard worker, but I hadn't realized how hard she had to work to provide for me and my brother. So seeing that, witnessing that, I knew it was my responsibility to kind of alleviate some of that pressure my mom had. I knew that I had to be, quote unquote, good. I had to be a good daughter. I couldn't get in any trouble. I had to be a good person. I couldn't have my mom, people out here in these streets talking about her because I was acting up. And I had to be a good student because, see, if I was a good student, I would get good grades. If I got good grades, I would get into a good school. If I graduated from a good school, I was going to get a good job. So that night, even though I was very young, I understood the value of education. I understood that I needed a diploma in order to do something. I understood that I needed good grades in order to get scholarships so my mom wouldn't have to pay for anything moving forward. So I excelled in school. I didn't like it though. Oftentimes when people say, oh, you're doing so well in school, you must just love it. I'm like, no. I really did not like school. And this baffled them because they thought, well, if a student doesn't like school, then that means they don't perform well, and that means they're quote unquote a bad student. But they didn't realize for me, it wasn't about school per se, it was about getting those grades so I was able to then move forward. So from elementary school, which by the way, this is me in 5th grade, I was the valedictorian of my 5th grade class. From elementary school to middle school, I mastered the traditional school. I mean, all they did was give us some worksheets every day. By the end of the week, we would have a test. That was not hard for me to memorize that material, keep it in my head for a week or so, then move on to the next phase. That wasn't a difficult task. So when I was introduced to New Tech in the 9th grade, I was highly upset. They were not traditional. I didn't have my worksheets. I didn't have a test every week. It was different. And within that first semester, I was failing. And I did not fail. And I was failing because I was resistant to the model. This was not something I was willing to give into. This was something I was not used to. But after getting those interim grades back, I had to remember my goal. The goal was to get good grades. So I immersed myself into this little model. And it's not because I liked it, because I really did not. It was because I had to pass. I had to get those good grades. What I hadn't realized was, as I participated in this learning mode, I was actually becoming a better learner. I was becoming a better person. I was more motivated. For example, in the traditional school, whenever we would have a difficult problem, I could kind of just badger the teachers until they gave me the answer. I'll just keep asking questions. I mean, this is the answer. Just get out of the face. So that was my technique. When I got to New Tech, no matter how many questions I asked them, they just looked at me and told me no. And I'm like, what? I'm not a teacher. I don't get paid for this. I ask you a question, you give me an answer. So that was a really difficult concept to grasp. You know, I had to start learning how to learn, start learning how to teach myself. And through that, I kind of became very persistent. Like whenever there was something like I needed to know, I had to know it, and I had to take that agency to go find it myself. So I'm a more motivated worker through that. I was also more engaging. In the traditional school, I did not do collaborative work. I'm sorry. I'm not going to give you a bad grade because of you. I'll give you a good grade, but you're not going to give me a bad one. So, yes, that I had to, start working with people. Made a couple of bad grades that first time because I wouldn't work with people. But then I learned how to work with different personalities. We knew how to play along each other's strengths and weaknesses, build each other up, and actually achieve an end goal working together. And actually, I was in Miss Murray's digital marketing class. And again, 8 different personalities, 8 totally different creative mindsets. And when we got this project and she kind of just told us to go, we were just thinking, okay, we had this project and we're gonna make this the best website Walterboro has ever seen. And that's another way I became engaged. I wasn't just engaged with my peers, I was actually engaged in the content that I was creating. And it was able to transcend to someone who wasn't even aware of this deeper learning model. It was someone who came from a different town, moving into Walterboro, not even knowing what work we were creating in our community. And he was able to see that and say, oh, well, I'm gonna use y'all for some more stuff. So from there, we're a marketing firm for him, a consulting firm. And that's because we were so engaged in the material that we were producing. And I also became more aware of my thoughts. Before New Tech, I was very quiet and shy, talked very fast, mumbled a lot, and I just wasn't very to really articulate what I was saying. It was very hard for people to understand my message, and it conveyed the same way through writing. But with New Tech, they really honed it in and helped me, be able to transcend my words from my mind to you. And as I was becoming this better person through this model, I realized that it was being noticed by my family, being noticed by my peers, and even being noticed by my school. Our very first year in New Tech, Cougar New Tech, I was presented the award for being Student of the Year, which was a big accomplishment because, again, that first semester I was failing because I was so resistant to this model, but by the end of it, I was a master at it, you know? I done mastered non-traditional learning, like I did traditional. So, moving forward again, I had many people in my community that could vouch for my character. They could vouch for who I was as a person, as a learner. But not everyone chose to see that aspect of me. I started cheering when I was in the 8th grade. So for 4 years, I was a cheerleader. Many of my coaches were very uplifting. They always encouraged everyone on the team to be the best versions of themselves and improve in every aspect of their life. During my junior year of high school, we got a new coach. We were a predominantly black team. And the way our coach would speak to us, it was kind of that she was implying that we were very violent and very rambunctious. Those stereotypical traits of a black girl, not even knowing that all of us were honor students, never having any behavioral records. It was just this treatment that she imposed on us that we weren't good enough. And we would work every day in our community, in our hallways, in our classroom, at practice. We intently showed her that we weren't those stigmas. We tried to dispel those traits that she tried to impose on us. But we were always met with resistance. Whenever we would try to sit her down, have conversations, explain to her how her treatment were affecting us, she kind of just blew it off, as in what we were feeling weren't valid enough. She even kicked off one of our captains in an attempt to kind of quiet us. She was like, I'm gonna take away your leader, y'all gonna stop bothering me, and we're gonna finish off the season. But yet we still continue to fight. We even went to her boss and we explained to him, we don't think we're being treated fairly. And all that he could say was, well, this is just how she is. Kind of just giving justifications for her actions. That whole year, for football and basketball season, it was literally a fight every day, just trying to get her to understand that her words and her actions were hurting us. And by the end of that season, I literally just could not fight anymore. I was so tired, I was so drained, I was so hurt. So I decided not to cheer my final year. And although that was a very hard decision, I did grow through that experience. I was thankful to grow because before then again, I was really quiet and shy. I found a voice. I found something that I believed in and I was able to fight for it. And I was also thankful to be a part of a team that had so many eloquent ladies that taught me how to fight conflicts in a very professional setting. But unfortunately, many kids aren't able to find their voice. They walk into these spaces that automatically label them, and they aren't able to find their voice to combat that negative energy. They get stuck in that space. They live in that space day to day, walking in their own classrooms that kind of already label them and give them this stigma that they can't be more. When really what I believe it will take is just a conversation for someone to just talk to them. Talk to them about their identities, their experiences, what makes them them. But oftentimes people aren't willing to go that extra mile to do that, especially in the classroom. What I would say is just to create a space that cultivates innovation. You already have these schools that have their own corridor of shame inside the hallways, the actual hallways, where kids aren't able to express themselves. But I do believe with just the conversation, you're able to cultivate a space, an environment where kids are willing to be open with you and to share their experiences and actually be able to learn in that environment. When you opt to see the able and not the label, you create an inclusive environment where students become innovators. So that is just my call to action to you all. See the able. See the able and not the label. Thank you.